The alarm blared at precisely 6:30 a.m., jolting Victor Tanner from a dream where his teeth were falling out one by one. He sat up, running his tongue over his molars instinctively before heading to the bathroom. Little did he know that across the galaxy, his dental structure had become the subject of intense academic fascination. Victor worked as a paleontologist at the Natural History Museum, specializing in early human dentition. The irony wasn't lost on him as he brushed his teeth that morning, studying his own reflection. At 35, his teeth were in good shape, a slight overbite corrected by childhood braces, wisdom teeth removed in his 20s, and a small chip on his left incisor from a mountain biking accident 3 years ago. His morning routine completed, Victor grabbed his bag and headed out to his car. The museum was hosting a special exhibition on human evolution, and his section on dental development through the ages had been particularly well received. Today was his day to give guided tours, which he actually enjoyed despite his general discomfort with public speaking. "Just another Tuesday," he muttered, pulling into the staff parking lot. But this Tuesday would be anything but ordinary. 17 light-years away, aboard the educational vessel Nexus Prime, 5 students from the planet Zenith were finalizing their research proposal for their xenobiology field study. The Nexus Prime was the most prestigious educational institution in the Galactic Federation, and being selected for the Earth Immersion program was considered the pinnacle of academic achievement. "Professor Clax will never approve this," said Elix, the youngest of the 5. His blue skin shimmered under the ship's lights as he nervously adjusted his breathing apparatus. "Humans are a protected species under the Non-Interference Directive." Traz, the team leader, waved 3 of her 7 appendages dismissively. "We're not interfering, we're observing." "There's a difference, and it's clearly outlined in subsection 47B of the treaty. Besides," added Moore, the tallest among them, "the directive permits limited interaction for educational purposes. This qualifies." Nex, who had been silent until now, projected a hologram from her ocular implant. The image showed Victor Tanner giving a lecture about human dental evolution. "I've identified our subject. His profession makes him ideal. He already possesses knowledge about dentition that exceeds the human average." Plex, the final member of their group, activated his own display. "According to my research, humans are the only sentient species in the known galaxy to retain such primitive omnivorous dentition while achieving technological advancement. The combination of incisors, canines, premolars, and molars suggests an evolutionary history that never fully committed to either plant or meat consumption." "Fascinating," Traz said, her eyes blinking in sequence, a sign of excitement in her species. "And you're sure this human exhibits all these traits?" Nex nodded. "Yes, I've been monitoring his public lectures. Victor Tanner has what humans consider an exemplary dental structure, and his professional knowledge makes him doubly valuable as a subject." "Then it's settled," Traz concluded. "We'll submit our proposal to Professor Clax today. Our project will focus on human dentition as an evolutionary anomaly, with Victor Tanner as our primary subject." Elix still looked uncertain. "But how do we observe him without being detected? Humans aren't aware of extraterrestrial civilizations." Traz smiled, revealing her own highly specialized filter feeding oral structure. "That's the brilliant part. We'll use the new quantum observation pods. They allow us to observe from a parallel dimensional pocket completely undetectable to humans." Professor Clax, contrary to Elix's prediction, approved their proposal with enthusiasm. The aging academic had spent decades studying Earth from afar and welcomed any opportunity to gather new data on what he considered the most puzzling species in the galaxy. "Just remember," he cautioned, his voice resonating through his throat sacs, "observation only, no contact, no samples, no interference whatsoever." The students agreed solemnly, though Traz's inner eyelid twitched slightly, a tell that her peers knew meant she was already considering how to push those boundaries. 2 Earth days later, Victor was at home preparing dinner. He had bought a rack of ribs from his favorite butcher and was marinating them for a barbecue. His sister and her family were coming over that weekend, and he wanted to perfect his technique beforehand. Unbeknownst to him, the 5 alien students had established their observation post in the quantum pocket, adjacent to his kitchen. The dimensional bubble they occupied allowed them to see and hear everything, while remaining completely undetectable to human senses. "Look at the manual dexterity," Plex noted, recording Victor's movements as he handled the meat. "The opposing thumb and precision grip evolved primarily for tool use, yet it serves multiple functions." "The most interesting part is coming," Nex said, adjusting her sensors. "Once he cooks the animal tissue, he'll use his teeth to separate it from the skeletal structure." Lix looked slightly queasy. "You mean he'll tear dead animal flesh with those exposed calcium structures in his mouth? That seems primitive." "That's exactly why it's fascinating," Traz countered. "Most species that develop technology eventually engineered their food or evolved beyond such direct consumption methods. Humans retained their omnivorous traits despite their advancement." Victor, oblivious to the scientific discussion he was inspiring, finished preparing the ribs and set them aside to marinate overnight. The alien students maintained their observation, taking shifts to monitor his activities. The next day, Victor went about his normal routine, teaching at the museum, meeting with colleagues, and returning home to check on his marinating ribs. The aliens followed, their observation pods shifting location with him. His dental hygiene rituals are quite elaborate, Moore noted as they watched Victor brush, floss, and use mouthwash before bed. "It suggests an awareness of dental vulnerability despite their importance to his survival." "Humans have replaced biological evolution with technological and cultural adaptations," Traz explained. "Rather than evolving more durable teeth, they created tools and practices to preserve the ones they have." The weekend arrived, and Victor's preparations for the barbecue intensified. The alien students were particularly excited, as this would be their first observation of a human social gathering centered around food consumption. Victor's sister, Wendy Owens, arrived with her husband Greg and their 10-year-old son Ethan. The aliens observed with fascination as the humans greeted each other with physical contact hugs and handshakes that seemed to serve no practical purpose beyond social bonding. "The younger human's dentition is in transition," Nex observed, focusing on Ethan. "See how he's losing his deciduous teeth and growing permanent replacements. Most species in the Federation undergo a single dental phase." As Victor fired up the grill, the conversation turned to his work at the museum. "How's the evolution exhibit going?" Wendy asked, sipping her wine. "Really well," Victor replied, arranging the ribs on the grill. "We've had record attendance this month. Kids especially love the section on Neanderthal dentition. Something about the slightly larger teeth seems to fascinate them." "Ethan lost another tooth yesterday," Greg mentioned. "The tooth fairy is going broke." The aliens exchanged confused glances at the mention of this tooth fairy, making a note to research this apparent dental-related mythology later. "Speaking of teeth," Victor said, turning the ribs, "these should be ready to sink ours into in about 20 minutes. The aliens' excitement grew as the cooking process neared completion. They had studied human cooking methods extensively, but witnessing it firsthand was different. The way the heat transformed the animal tissue, the chemical reactions that created new compounds, the apparent enhancement of palatability, all of it seemed designed to make the food more appealing to human senses. Finally, Victor brought the ribs to the table. The aliens watched, recording everything as he served portions to his family. "Now observe closely," Traz instructed her teammates. "This is the behavior we've been waiting for." Victor picked up a rib with his hands, brought it to his mouth, and bit down. His incisors and canines pierced the cooked meat, and with a slight tearing motion, he separated a piece from the bone. His molars then ground the food before he swallowed. "Incredible," Plex exclaimed. The coordination between different tooth types, the jaw muscles, the tongue all working in concert. "Notice how he's not merely consuming for survival," Moore added. "There's a clear pleasure response. His brain is releasing dopamine and endorphins." Amazing ribs, Vic, Wendy said, following her brother's example and tearing meat from a bone with her teeth. What's in the marinade? The aliens continued their observation, documenting every aspect of the meal. They noted how the humans used their hands despite having utensils available, how they seemed to derive social pleasure from sharing the experience, and how efficiently their dental structures processed the food. Ethan, the youngest human, had some difficulty with the process, requiring assistance from his father to cut the meat into smaller pieces. This sparked a debate among the aliens about the learned versus instinctual aspects of human feeding behavior. This confirms my hypothesis, Traz said proudly. Human dentition represents an evolutionary compromise that has been maintained because it offers flexibility. Their teeth allow them to process a wide variety of foods, which has been advantageous throughout their evolutionary history. But is it efficient? Elix questioned. Most advanced species have either specialized or developed technological alternatives to biological consumption. That's what makes humans interesting, Nex replied. They've developed technology that could render their natural dentition obsolete, yet they maintain cultural practices that celebrate these primitive consumption methods. As the humans finished their meal, Victor began telling a story about a fossil discovery, a 2-million-year-old hominin jawbone that showed evidence of tool use for processing food. Even back then, our ancestors were using tools to help them eat, he explained to Ethan. But they still needed strong teeth for survival. That's why human canines are smaller than those of predators but still sharp enough to tear meat. Like what we just did with the ribs, Ethan asked. Exactly, Victor confirmed. Our teeth tell the story of our evolution. The aliens were fascinated by this meta-moment, a human explaining the evolutionary significance of the very behavior they were studying. After dinner, as the humans moved to the living room for dessert, Traz made a decision that would change the course of their research. I think we need to expand our study, she announced to her team. Observation is yielding valuable data, but imagine what we could learn from direct examination. That would violate the directive, Elix protested immediately. Not necessarily, Traz countered. Subsection 47C allows for limited direct study if the subject is temporarily extracted from their environment with no lasting effects or memories. You're suggesting we abduct him? Moore asked, his tone neutral but his posture indicating concern. Abduct has negative connotations, Traz replied. I prefer temporarily borrow for scientific examination. We would return him with no memory of the experience and no harm done. Professor Clax would never approve, Nex said, which is why we won't ask him, Traz responded. This is our research project. We take responsibility for it. The debate continued among the students, but Traz's authority as team leader eventually prevailed. They would wait until Victor was alone and asleep, then use their extraction technology to bring him aboard their research vessel for a detailed dental examination. That night, after his family had gone home and Victor had cleaned up, he went to bed feeling satisfied with the successful gathering. He fell asleep quickly, unaware of the 5 pairs of alien eyes watching him from their dimensional pocket. His brain waves indicate he's entered the deep sleep phase, Nex reported. Now is the optimal time. Traz activated the extraction device. A soft blue light enveloped Victor's sleeping form, and he vanished from his bed, reappearing seconds later on an examination table in the research vessel's laboratory. Quick, administer the suspension field before he wakes, Traz ordered. Plex activated a device that immobilized Victor in a gentle energy field. His vital signs were monitored carefully to ensure he remained in stable condition. Begin the dental scan, Traz instructed. A sophisticated scanner descended from the ceiling, projecting a grid of light over Victor's face. It created a detailed 3-dimensional model of his dental structure, documenting every tooth, filling, and microscopic wear pattern. This is remarkable, Moore said, examining the data. Look at the microwear on his molars. It shows evidence of a diverse diet spanning years. The canines show less wear than I expected, Nex noted. perhaps because modern humans use utensils for most of their meat consumption, reserving direct dental processing for specific cultural foods like the ribs we observed. Their examination continued, with the students taking turns analyzing different aspects of Victor's dentition. They were so engrossed in their research that they failed to notice a fluctuation in the suspension field until it was too late. Victor's eyes snapped open. For a moment, he thought he was still dreaming. The bright lights, strange equipment, and blue-skinned creatures around him seemed like elements from one of his more bizarre nightmares. Then the realization hit him. This was real. He tried to move but found himself paralyzed by an invisible force. He could only move his eyes, which darted frantically from one alien face to another. "The subject is conscious," Elix reported unnecessarily, his voice high with panic. "Impossible," Traz snapped. "The suspension field should maintain the sleep state." "There must have been a calibration error," Plex suggested. "Human neurology is still not fully understood." Victor tried to speak but couldn't move his jaw. His heart raced and his breathing became rapid and shallow. "He's experiencing a fear response," Nex observed. "His vital signs are approaching dangerous levels." Traz made a quick decision. "Administer a sedative and memory suppressant. We need to complete our examination and return him before any lasting psychological damage occurs." Moore prepared an injection device, but before he could administer it, the ship's alarm system activated. "Unauthorized biological examination in progress," announced the ship's AI. "Protocol violation detected. Alerting supervisory staff. Override," Traz commanded, but it was too late. The laboratory doors slid open, and Professor Clax entered, his normally pale gray skin flushed purple with anger. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded, taking in the scene. His eyes widened when he saw Victor. "You've extracted a human subject without authorization." "Professor, we can explain," Traz began. "Release him immediately," Clax ordered, "and prepare for disciplinary action." Plex deactivated the suspension field but kept the sedation system active to prevent Victor from full mobility or clear consciousness. "This is a serious violation of the non-interference directive," Clax continued. "You've potentially compromised decades of careful anthropological work." "We were only trying to gather more comprehensive data," Traz argued. "Our observational findings suggested—" "Your findings are now irrelevant," Clax interrupted. "This human must be returned immediately with all memory of this encounter erased." Victor, still unable to move properly but now aware of his surroundings, listened to this exchange with a mixture of terror and fascination. These creatures were discussing him as if he were a specimen, and apparently they had been watching him for some time. Clax approached Victor directly, speaking in perfect English. "Human, I deeply regret this unauthorized intervention. I assure you that you will be returned to your home with no lasting effects or memories of this event." Victor managed to form words, though his speech was slurred from the sedation. What are you?" Clax hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. "Since you will not remember this conversation, I see no harm in satisfying your curiosity. We are xenobiologists from a planet you would call Zenith. These are students who have been studying human dentition as part of their academic research." "My teeth," Victor mumbled, confused. "Yes," Clax confirmed. "Human dental structures are quite unique in the galaxy, a perfect balance of versatility that few species achieve. These students were particularly interested in how you use them to consume cooked animal tissue attached to bones." Despite his fear, the scientist in Victor was intrigued. "You mean, when I eat ribs?" "Precisely," Clax said. "The behavior you exhibited earlier today, tearing meat from bones with your teeth, is fascinating from an evolutionary perspective." Victor might have laughed if he weren't so terrified. All this advanced technology, these beings from another world, and they were interested in watching him eat barbecue, Professor, Nex interrupted. "The memory suppressant needs to be administered within the next few minutes to be fully effective." Clax nodded. "Proceed." As Moore prepared the injection again, Victor managed to ask one more question. "Will I remember any of this?" "No," Clax replied. "It's better that way for both our species." The last thing Victor saw before losing consciousness was the curious faces of the 5 alien students, still studying him with scientific interest. When Victor awoke the next morning in his own bed, he felt strangely refreshed, despite vivid dreams he couldn't quite remember. Something about blue creatures and bright lights, but the details slipped away as he got up. He went about his morning routine, brushing his teeth thoroughly as always. For some reason, he found himself examining his teeth in the mirror more carefully than usual, running his tongue over his canines and wondering about their evolutionary purpose. Later that day at the museum, he gave a lecture on dental evolution with unusual enthusiasm, emphasizing how human teeth represented an evolutionary compromise that offered versatility across various food types. "Our dentition tells the story of our past," he told the audience, "but it also connects us to the present through cultural practices like barbecues, where we still use our teeth to tear meat from bones just as our ancestors did." Aboard the Nexus Prime, the 5 students faced disciplinary action for their unauthorized examination. However, Professor Clax was surprisingly lenient. "While your methods were unacceptable," he told them, "your research itself has merit. The data you gathered both through observation and your brief examination provides valuable insights into human biology and culture." "Then we can continue our research," Traz asked hopefully. "With stricter oversight," Clax qualified, "and absolutely no further direct contact." The students agreed readily, grateful to avoid more severe consequences. "There is one interesting development," Nex mentioned, reviewing their follow-up observations. "The human seems to have retained some subconscious awareness of our study." His lectures have begun to focus more specifically on the evolutionary aspects of dentition that interested us. "Impossible," Clax dismissed. "The memory suppressant is foolproof." "Perhaps not memory," Moore suggested, "but inspiration. Ideas that seemed to arise from his own thoughts, but were actually planted during our examination." "An interesting hypothesis," Clax acknowledged. "Continue monitoring him, but with absolute adherence to protocols." The students returned to their observation, watching as Victor continued his work at the museum, occasionally enjoying meals that showcased his dental versatility. They compiled their research into what would become the most comprehensive study of human dentition in the Galactic Federation's academic database. 6 months later, Victor published a paper titled "The Cultural Significance of Omnivorous Dentition in Modern Humans," which earned him recognition in the anthropological community. He couldn't explain exactly what had inspired this particular research direction, but it felt important somehow. On the anniversary of their initial observation, the alien students held a small celebration in their dimensional pocket while watching Victor host another barbecue for his family. "To human teeth," Traz toasted, raising a container of nutritional solution. "May they continue to fascinate xenobiologists for generations to come." "And to Victor Tanner," Nex added, "who taught us more than he'll ever know." As if hearing his name, Victor paused mid-bite, a rib held between his hands. For a brief moment, he glanced around, feeling as if he were being watched. Then he shrugged off the sensation and returned to his meal, tearing meat from bone with the perfect dental tools evolution had given him. The aliens observed with scientific appreciation as Victor's teeth performed their ancient function, incisors holding, canines tearing, and molars grinding the food into digestible pieces. It was a simple act, mundane to humans but extraordinary in the context of galactic biology. When Victor's paper was eventually included in the museum's permanent exhibition on human evolution, the section on dentition became the most popular feature. Children especially loved the interactive display that explained how different teeth served different functions. What Victor never knew was that his work had sparked a new field of study on Zenith, with dozens of researchers now specializing in Earth's unique evolutionary compromises. His teeth and his barbecue technique had become the foundation of an academic discipline that would influence alien understanding of humanity for centuries. Traz, Nex, Plex, Moore, and even the cautious Alix all went on to distinguished careers, frequently citing their research on human dentition as their formative academic experience. Professor Clax eventually retired, but not before establishing the Victor Tanner Grant for Excellence in Xenobiology named, he claimed, after an obscure historical figure from his planet's past. 2 years after their initial observation, the students, now graduates with their own research projects, gathered for a reunion. They connected to the observation network and checked in on Victor, who was now the head curator at the museum and had expanded the evolution exhibit to include a special section on the relationship between cooking and dental development. He's still fascinatingly fixated on teeth, Nex noted. Do you think the memory suppressant truly worked? The specific memories were erased, Traz replied, but perhaps some deeper impression remained, a curiosity that drives his research without him knowing why. Or perhaps, Moore suggested, he was already on this intellectual path, and we simply witnessed a natural progression of his scientific interests. Either way, Plex concluded, our study of him studying teeth has created a recursive loop of knowledge that benefits both our civilizations, even if only one side is aware of it. They watched as Victor demonstrated to a group of schoolchildren how early humans would have used their teeth to process food, mimicking the tearing motion with his own bite. Look at their faces, Alix said, noting the children's fascinated expressions. They're experiencing the same scientific curiosity we did. The universal nature of discovery, Traz agreed. Across species and worlds, the desire to understand drives us forward. As Victor continued his demonstration, somewhere deep in his subconscious, a faint memory stirred blue faces, curious eyes, and a conversation about the evolutionary significance of tearing meat from bones. But the thought faded as quickly as it appeared, leaving only the inexplicable feeling that his work on human dentition somehow connected him to something larger than himself. And in a way, it did. His teeth and his study of them had built a bridge between worlds, a connection neither he nor his audience would ever consciously know existed, but which had forever changed the course of xenobiological research across the galaxy. The alien students, now respected researchers in their own right, continued to monitor Victor occasionally throughout his career. They watched as he published more papers, mentored new generations of anthropologists, and never lost his fascination with the evolutionary story told by human teeth. They never interfered again, never risked another direct examination. Their initial mistake had taught them the value of ethical research boundaries. But they remained forever grateful for that one barbecue weekend when they had watched, with scientific wonder, as Victor Tanner used his remarkable dentition to rip meat off the bone, an ordinary human act that had opened extraordinary insights into the connection between biology, culture, and the universal pursuit of knowledge.